You are watching Bengals Breakdown by Chat Sports, and I am your host, Stone Shields. Thanks so much for hanging out with us here on a Tuesday afternoon. Coming up on today's show, got a loaded show here today. Several things that we got to talk about. Jaire Alexander, of course, cornerback for the Green Bay Packers. There's been some reports from ESPN that his time in Green Bay very well could be up. So we'll talk about that, and also could he potentially find a home in Cincinnati with the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll talk about that on today's show. Also, ESPN released their top 50 list of free agents expected to hit NFL free agency here in a month or so, and only one with a perfect landing spot of Cincinnati. We will break down who that player is and what they could bring to this Cincinnati Bengals football team. Also, The Athletic released potential salary cap cut candidates for all 32 teams. We'll talk about who they listed for the Bengals. And as we mentioned in our short that went out this morning, the Bengals punter Rehkow has been extended. We will talk about that to close out today's show. But before we get into that, make sure you guys share today's video for me if you have not done so already on social media. Boston said we got to get our shares numbers up here in the month of February, and that's exactly what we are trying to do. Going for over 20 shares here on this video. Any platform in which you want to share it on works for us. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. Share today's video for me right now. All right, so as I mentioned, ESPN reports that Packers cornerback Jaire Alexander very well could be released by the Green Bay Packers. Now, this is a guy that several years ago really was one of the best cornerbacks in the National Football League, and despite the fact that he's been banged up the past couple of years, he's still really a guy that I like a lot, and I still think he has a lot of ability in this league as a lockdown corner. Let's get to what Rob Demovsky had to say for ESPN, covers the Packers for ESPN in regards to Jaire Alexander. This is what he wrote. There are strong indications that Alexander's time with the Packers will end without him playing another down. Multiple team sources have privately expressed their frustration with Alexander's inability to stay healthy and or play through injuries. The 2018 first-round pick has 2 years remaining on the 4-year, $84 million contract extension that made him the highest-paid cornerback in the NFL at the time. The Packers would pick up nearly $6.8 million in salary cap space for 2025 if they release him, or more than $17 million if they designate him a post-June 1st cut. So back-to-back years for Jaire Alexander. He has only played in 7 games. Obviously, that is a massive red flag. And also, kind of to add to that equation, he practiced sporadically for the Green Bay Packers after that November 17th date, which is kind of why people are a little bit frustrated that, hey, maybe he was able to go out there and play with his teammates, but was not doing that. So that's certainly a question mark if they're going after the toughness of Jaire Alexander. I find it hard to believe, though, that he would ultimately decide not to play and that he was too banged up in order to do so if it was something that he could play through, right? He did have PCL surgery, according to him, after the end of the season, so that certainly is noteworthy as well. And despite the fact he only played 7 games, he finished second on the team in pass breakups and tied for second in interceptions, which is pretty miraculous with such a small sample size. As we've talked about in regards to Jaire Alexander, he's one of those cornerbacks that absolutely goes out there and talks crazy, right? Like, if he was a member of the Cincinnati Bengals, him and Jamar Chase would absolutely go at it at practice, but there are some diva concerns when it comes to Jaire Alexander, and also maybe some concerns that he's a little bit more worried about himself than he is about the rest of his team, right? At the end of the season, he declined to speak with reporters, saying that he had nothing good to say. And, that's not really what you're looking for out of a leader, certainly not what you're looking for out of a guy that was once the highest-paid cornerback in the National Football League. But as I've mentioned, I do believe Cincinnati needs a veteran to add to their cornerback room. You still have uncertainty there with Mike Hilton and his future. Of course, he is expected to hit free agency as well. You got a lot of youth in that room. I think bringing in a veteran certainly could be a good thing. And if you remember when the Bengals had their most, success on defense, who was one of their cover corners? It was Eli Apple. And what did Eli Apple always do? He always ran his mouth constantly, and maybe that's something you need on your football team, right? I don't think it necessarily would be a bad thing if Jaire Alexander came to Cincinnati, and I probably, myself, are a little bit higher on Jaire Alexander than a lot of other people that talk about certainly the NFL and the Bengals as well. So unlikely that Cincinnati would make a move to try to bring him in, but I'd honestly be here for it, to be completely honest with you. Leads to the pinned comment of today's video. Do you want Jaire Alexander in Cincinnati? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section of today's video. Type Y for yes or N for no. If that ad comes here on YouTube, that's totally fine. Take advantage of it. Get down in the comments. Let us know what you think. All right, so ESPN also listed their top 50 players becoming free agents, and they listed the perfect home for each of the 50 free agents. And only one guy made the list for Cincinnati. I do want to make note, T. Higgins certainly was at the top of that list, right? But again, after the reports yesterday, certainly looks like Cincinnati going to franchise tag him and try to work forward in terms of reaching an extension with T. Higgins. So I didn't bring him up here, but again, they're talking about people that would essentially come to Cincinnati. And the person that they listed is James Daniels, who, of course, we have talked about here on Bengals Breakdown, discussed him in our offensive line free agents video. I believe that was a week or so ago. Certainly some red flags with James Daniels, the first being that he tore his Achilles in week 4. That's a brutal injury for any football player, any athlete, but truly a brutal injury for an offensive lineman. Obviously, they need that stability there in run blocking and pass blocking, and they're obviously massive human beings as well. That kind of complicates things even further, but he would be a low risk financially because of this injury, right? I think he's going to try to, play it out. I think a team could get him for kind of a vet min type situation and then kind of go from there, right? When you're talking about a guy like James Daniels. Burrow was sacked 48 times last season. Obviously, that is unacceptable. I might even make the argument that, hey, that is more of a problem than the defense. And we know how big of a problem the defense is, right? Bengals have allocated resources to their offensive line in the past. It hasn't worked out. James Daniels certainly could be a guy that you bring in. Also, he was really, really good as a run blocker, right? From weeks 1 to 4, his run block rate of 82.7 ranked second in the National Football League among guards behind Quentin Nelson, which certainly, is intriguing if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. But I'm more worried about that pass block. Look at that pass block rate, 66.6 there per PFF. Of course, to me, that's my biggest concern when you're talking about offensive line play. Bengals pass blocking, especially on the interior, has to get better, and I'm not exactly sure James Daniels provides that for you if you are the Cincinnati Bengals, but certainly has experience in the AFC North, having spent the past couple of seasons with Pittsburgh, so I understand why Cincinnati would be linked to him by ESPN. We'll continue with our show here in a moment, but first, a shout out to our friends over at Fanatics. Reminder, Bengals Sideline Hats are available, and you can get them over at Fanatics right now. They got a bunch of cool ones up there. Got several of these myself, like to rock them from time to time. Obviously, it is the off-season here at this point, but that doesn't mean you can't up your Bengals swag, courtesy of our friends over at Fanatics. So hit that link right there, chatsports.com/Bengals Sideline. That will be in the comment section and the description of today's video. All right, now I'm going to talk about Sheldon Rankins here. So the Athletic listed potential cut candidates, just one candidate for each of the 32 NFL teams, and they listed Sheldon Rankins for the Cincinnati Bengals. And my only issue with this is the word potential. There's nothing potential about this if you're talking about cutting Sheldon Rankins. This absolutely is going to happen. When you look at his tenure in Cincinnati, absolute disaster, right? Only played 7 games, and then those 7 games, the impact of one Sheldon Rankins was certainly limited. It felt like, what was that, the Chargers week where he kind of came up with this illness, right? It was first reported that he had this illness. Next thing you know, it took him out for the entirety of the season. He decided to keep that behind closed doors, him and his team did, so we really don't have any information on what exactly that illness was. When you're talking about what kept Sheldon Rankins out of the lineup for the Cincinnati Bengals, don't want to, attack him. It certainly could have been something very, very serious. But ultimately, even if it weren't for that, it clearly was one of the biggest whiffs in recent memory for the Cincinnati Bengals at that free agency period when they're trying to bring new talent into their football team. Had an opportunity to bring back DJ Reader, and instead he went to Detroit for less money than what you paid Sheldon Rankins. So that really is a massive issue for me. No doubt whatsoever Cincinnati is going to cut Sheldon Rankins. They're going to save a lot of money in the process as well and look to develop their youth along the defensive line and perhaps bring in another guy in free agency this time around. Another opportunity for you guys to get involved with our show here at Bengals Breakdown. Name a player you would cut. Let me know in the comment section. I didn't ask if you would cut Sheldon Rankins because I think we're all an agreement when it comes to that, right? Obviously, we all have our different opinions on different aspects of the Cincinnati Bengals, but I think we're all on the same page there. Cincinnati certainly should cut Sheldon Rankins, but regardless, let me know a different player that you would cut in the comments of today's video. Lastly, before we get out of here, as I mentioned at the top, we had a short that went out this morning kind of detailing Ryan Rehkow and his extension with the Cincinnati Bengals. Certainly happy for Ryan and his family that he's probably going to be sticking around. Rehkow was really a late addition to the Cincinnati Bengals. If you remember, they brought in Austin McNamara to really challenge Brad Robbins at that punter position, and then ultimately they cut McNamara and bring in Rehkow, and then he kind of takes the job. Won it by default, right, because he had the injury to Robbins, but when he had the opportunity to go out there, he really delivered. Really some nice stats when you're talking about the punter here. Ryan Rehkow, his gross punting average, 49.1, and net punting average, 42.9. Each set a Bengals single-season record, which is pretty impressive. And he also set some NFL records as well. Set an NFL single-game record with 64.5 yards per punt, minimum of 4 attempts, by the way. That was week 1 against the New England Patriots. So that's not really something to celebrate, right? Because he played so bad offensively in that game, and your rookie punter got a ton of work. But he was able to go out there and execute. The biggest issue with Ryan Rehkow and this extension that I have is the holding trouble that you saw. Really, there was only one super bad hold, lost you the game, right, against Baltimore at home when he wasn't able to hold on to that snap. But Evan McPherson had the worst year of his career, and I think you kind of have to, relate that to the holder a little bit, especially given the success that McPherson certainly had with Kevin Huber and even Brad Robbins, more so than Ryan Rehkow. So I am a little bit concerned about that. Punting this day and age, Kevin Huber used to say it all the time, it really is just as much about holding as it is with punting. And the Bengals had all types of troubles kicking field goals. And if they want to get to where they want to get to, that special teams unit has to get back to where it once was, especially in 2021. Hopefully Ryan Rehkow can help with that, but he certainly had a phenomenal year punting the football, and I think for the most part this is probably deserved, but certainly want to clean up that stuff in the holding game as well. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you have not done so already. We're here all off season long. Don't miss any of our coverage here at Bengals Breakdown. Hit that sub button, youtube.com/BengalsTV.